Joining us now on the stakes of this early fire season is Red Deer Fire Chief Ken McMullen. He is also the president of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
So we just gave a bit of an overview there of this situation. Tell us what you're hearing from the people on the ground right now.
Well, I think it's repeating a lot of the messages that were given that we've got some issues in front of us. We knew going into the fire season of 2024 that it was going to be as volatile, if not more volatile, than the fire season of 2023. And unfortunately, those predictions are coming true. As your introduction had said, we've got fires raging all around Western Canada. British Columbia, here in my own home province of Alberta, are certainly seeing some high fire activity. And so that's really what we're facing right now, is just a wait and see game. We're a victim of what the weather does, and we're certainly a victim of how us as society react to some of the warning signs that we were giving citizens.
Yeah, given how early this has started, because it has been quite the early start to the wildfire season, how concerned are you about the summer to come?
It is exactly just that. It is concerning. It is not often that the fire chiefs are sounding the alarm, but I'm here to tell you we are. We're here to tell you that there's work that needs to be done. It needs to be done at the federal level, all the way through to our provinces, territories, as well as to our citizens. Our communities all have a stake in what we can do to make this as small of an impact as possible, knowing that we've got some risks in front of us in the coming months.
Yeah, you talked about the federal responsibility. Last year, you and your association were in Ottawa warning of an impending crisis in the summer of 2024, but that was specifically because of staff and equipment shortages. Have those been addressed at all?
Yes and no. The data still continues to show that we're losing men and women in the Canadian Fire Service. And in fact, just some rough numbers, we've lost about 30,000 since 2016. And although we've recovered somewhere around 28,000 of those, it's the years of experience that just aren't replaceable, and certainly aren't replaceable quickly. As far as aging equipment, I think there's two things that we're facing. We continue to see a challenge in resourcing equipment throughout the world. And as inflation impacts all of us as normal everyday consumers, it seems to be hitting us in emergency services that much harder. The equipment is costlier, takes longer to get, and quite frankly, it's just not here in time in many cases. So our frontline men and women are using equipment that is not ideal for what we're asking them to use it for.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the men and women as well. Last year, you guys ran a census, and it found that 9,500 volunteer firefighters averaging 10 to 12 years of experience left the fire sector. Do you have enough people to fight the fires this year?
It's a great question. We rely on a lot of things. We rely on men and women to come and do their responsibility as volunteers in our communities. We rely on the great urban municipal fire departments that support us. We rely on the men and women in our wildland firefighting who are, quite frankly, the first on the scene when we're talking about wildfire. I think a lot of people have a bit of a misunderstanding that our municipal firefighters, the big city firefighters that are trained to protect structures, we are not our wildland firefighters in this country. Different in other countries, but here in Canada, our wildland firefighters are the first to respond to wildfire. Municipal firefighters that our organization represent, we come in and assist when that fire is leaving the forested area and coming into what we call the wildland-urban interface. With that, if I may, I really want to say thank you and recognize the work of the government for doubling the volunteer firefighter tax credit. It is one way that we believe we will continue to see men and women provide these services on a volunteer basis. It's not enough. We need more coordination. We need our federal government to consider a national fire coordination here in Canada. And again, I'll repeat myself, we need you as citizens to do what you're asked to do. Be prepared, have a 72-hour kit, and heed the advice of those officials that are giving us the warnings to be prepared.
I wanted to go back to the federal help. Last week, Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan announced an initiative to strengthen the capabilities of non-governmental organizations like the Canadian Red Cross and St. John Ambulance. Is that going to help at all on the front lines in making sure that those fires can be fought properly, those wildfires?
I think you bring up two valid points. And number one is anything's going to help. We'll certainly benefit from the coordination. And I would like to say that we're at that table. We are talking with our colleagues in the Red Cross, St. John's Ambulance, just to name a couple. Our perspective is to ensure and remind that every event starts locally. The firefighters in these countries are the first to respond to these events. And also in this country, 80% of all fire chiefs in this country are also the managers of emergency management. So we wear the dual hats. We have to respond to both. We are going to ensure that if we bring in other agencies to support in a wildfire or in a municipal fire, that they have the proper training and expertise in order to do the job. That's our stake in the game, is to make sure that we understand that these additional resources that the minister is referring to are doing it safely and appropriately and under the right direction.
Yeah, in the past, we've seen members of the Canadian Armed Forces help, but last week, Minister Sajjan said that they would not be the best resource to deal with a lot of emergencies, including wildfires. Are you worried that they may not be available to help if you do need them with these wildfires that we've seen in the past? A number of members of the Canadian Armed Forces have gone out to help.
Our colleagues in the Canadian Armed Forces have done a tremendous job for us in municipalities in the past. What the point is that the Canadian Armed Forces that are deployed to do the resource allocations on these wildfires are not firefighters. They're not trained to be firefighters. So again, I go back to my point of making sure we put the right resources in at the right time to do the right tasks. Our Canadian Armed Forces colleagues do a great deal of work for us. Typically, you're going to see them doing sandbagging. Maybe in wildfires, they're helping us clear some of the debris in between fire breaks. Some really good work. But I think, again, there was a bit of a misnomer that our colleagues in the Canadian Armed Forces that were being sent to our municipal supports were there to fight the fire. And that was never the case, nor was the intention to do that. I believe, and the minister has reassured the Canadian fire chiefs, that they will be there to assist if and when needed, making sure they're doing the right task that is being needed.
So just in closing here, before we leave you, what is your message to Canadians? I know you had said make sure that you have a bag ready, but it seems like this is more and happening more and more, and Canadians and more communities are in this sort of danger zone. What do you want to see going forward so that Canadians understand how much of a danger wildfires are and what they can do to help their communities?
Most certainly, and I'll start by simply saying, give back to your community. If you've got the capabilities to assist in a non-GO role or a volunteer firefighter role, please consider doing that for your communities. Second of all, when we talk about preparedness, there are some wonderful principles out there referred to as the Fire Smart principles. You can look them online. You can Google search Fire Smart principles, and it'll tell you tools and tips of how to prepare your own property to reduce the risk of fire on your own property. Individually, I think there's two things. What we can do to prepare, and I talked about having and creating a 72-hour kit. The other side that we can do as citizens is reduce the risks. Let's do what we can. If there's a ban that says no off-road vehicles in an area, respect it. It's a law. It's not being asked because we just don't want you to have fun. It's being asked because of the increased risk that activity is putting on the risk of fire, or ultimately, if we're in an area where we're actively fighting a fire, you're not helping. So those are some of the messages just off the top of mind that we would give to all Canadians to help us help them in the event of this unprecedented, again, wildfire season of 2024.
President of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, Ken McMullen, thank you so much, not only for your time, but for your service as well. We appreciate it.
Thank you for you, all your listeners, for what you do. Thanks for covering the story. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.